Have you ever felt that strange disconnect between your daily routine and a deeper calling that seems to whisper from somewhere beyond your conscious mind? That subtle yet persistent feeling that there's something ancient and powerful within you, waiting to be acknowledged. In our modern world of constant distraction and superficial connections, most of us walk through life with a nagging sense that we're merely skimming the surface of our true potential. We feel adrift in a sea of information, yet starving for wisdom. This disconnect becomes particularly profound when we observe those rare individuals who seem to have accessed something primordial within themselves, especially women who appear to have awakened what can only be described as their ancestral energy. The philosophical framework of Immanuel Kant, though seemingly abstract and inaccessible to many, offers us a surprising pathway to understanding this phenomenon. Many avoid exploring Kant's ideas because they appear overly complex, creating an unfortunate barrier between profound philosophical knowledge and its practical application in understanding our deeper human experience. That sense of inadequacy you might feel when confronted with Kantian philosophy mirrors the very disconnection from our ancestral wisdom that characterizes our modern condition. By the end of this exploration, however, you'll gain not just a theoretical understanding of how Kant's concepts illuminate the signals of ancestral awakening, but practical insights that will transform how you recognize and potentially nurture these qualities in yourself and others. The philosophical tools we'll uncover together aren't merely academic exercises, but gateways to perceiving the world with new depth and clarity. Understanding these concepts now can immediately enhance your ability to recognize authentic wisdom and distinguish it from its many counterfeits in our world of endless performance and posturing. Let's embark on this journey of philosophical discovery together, exploring how Kant's profound insights can help us recognize the unmistakable signals of a woman who has awakened her ancestral energy. We often approach philosophy as something separate from our lived experience, as if the great thinkers like Kant were merely constructing intellectual castles in the sky, disconnected from the raw texture of human existence. But what if Kant's categorical imperative, his ideas about transcendental knowledge, and his understanding of the noumenal realm could help us identify and understand the profound transformation that occurs when a woman connects with her ancestral wisdom? The first signal of such an awakening reveals itself through what Kant might recognize as a shift in the fundamental maxims by which a person lives. In Kantian terms, a maxim is the subjective principle that determines how we act, a personal rule that guides our choices. When a woman awakens her ancestral energy, there is a profound transformation in these personal maxims, not as an intellectual exercise, but as an embodied reality that radiates through her entire being. This first signal manifests as an unmistakable authenticity. Consider how most of us live, according to maxims shaped predominantly by social conditioning, external expectations, and the relentless pursuit of approval. We craft ourselves to be palatable, to fit within the narrow confines of what our culture deems acceptable. But a woman who has awakened her ancestral energy operates from maxims that spring from a deeper source. She embodies what Kant called moral autonomy, the capacity to give oneself the law rather than merely following conventions imposed from without. You can recognize this signal by observing how such a woman makes choices that often defy conventional wisdom, yet somehow carry an authority that transcends social approval. Her decisions emerge not from a rebellious impulse, but from a centered awareness that seems to draw from an ancient wellspring of knowing. She moves through the world with a curious combination of gentle strength and unwavering certainty that makes others simultaneously comfortable in her presence, yet slightly in awe of her. In essence, her actions suggest that she has accessed what Kant would call the noumenal realm, that dimension of reality that exists beyond the limits of our sensory experience, where the deepest truths about our existence reside. Let me pause here and ask you directly. How many times have you felt lost trying to connect Kant's philosophical concepts with your own existence, particularly when it comes to recognizing deeper patterns of wisdom and authenticity in yourself and others? That feeling that there's something profound to be understood about your own ancestral connections, but somehow it remains just beyond your reach. You're not alone in this. Many of us carry this quiet restlessness, this desire to truly understand how philosophical frameworks like Kant's can illuminate the fundamental aspects of our being that connect us to something ancient and powerful. I'd love for you to share your experience in the comments below. Something as simple as my biggest challenge with connecting Kant to ancestral wisdom is Kinju. Your comment not only helps me create content that's more aligned with your actual needs, but also creates a community where others facing similar obstacles might feel understood and less isolated in their philosophical journey. It's through this sincere exchange that we grow together. So please, pause the video for a moment and share your experience. Your voice matters more than you might imagine. The second signal that indicates a woman has awakened her ancestral energy appears in her relationship to time and causality, concepts that Kant explored extensively in his critique of pure reason. According to Kant, time is not an objective feature of reality, but rather a necessary structure imposed by our minds to make sense of our experience. It is, in his terms, a form of intuition, part of the apparatus through which we perceive the world. A woman connected to her ancestral energy seems to inhabit time differently from others. She demonstrates what we might call temporal sovereignty, a quality that manifests in several observable ways. Most obviously, she resists the modern obsession with rushing and productivity. She moves at a pace that seems almost out of step with our frantically accelerating world, yet somehow accomplishes what's necessary without the frenzied energy that characterizes so much of contemporary life. This isn't mere slowness or inefficiency. Rather, it's a different relationship to time itself. She appears to understand intuitively what Kant articulated philosophically, that time is not an external taskmaster, but a dimension of experience that can be inhabited with greater or lesser awareness. More subtly, a woman who has awakened her ancestral energy demonstrates a peculiar relationship to causality. Kant argued that causality, like time, is a category that the mind imposes upon experience to make sense of it. We need to understand events as causes and effects to navigate our world successfully. Yet, there are dimensions of reality that may transcend this simple, linear causality. A woman connected to her ancestral wisdom often exhibits what appears to be an uncanny anticipation of events, not through supernatural foresight, but through a more comprehensive understanding of the complex web of causes and effects that shape our world. She notices patterns and connections that others miss, seeing how seemingly disparate events relate to one another in meaningful ways. This heightened awareness isn't mystical, but perceptual. She simply pays attention to dimensions of experience that most of us have been conditioned to ignore. In Kantian terms, she has developed a more refined faculty of judgment, an enhanced ability to apply the understanding to particular cases. This refined judgment allows her to navigate life with a graceful prescience that can seem almost magical to those who haven't cultivated similar awareness. The third signal revealing ancestral awakening relates to what Kant described as the sublime, that overwhelming experience that simultaneously humbles and elevates us. In his Critique of Judgment, Kant distinguished between the mathematical sublime and the dynamical sublime. The mathematical sublime refers to encounters with vastness that exceed our ability to comprehend, like contemplating the infinite expanse of the night sky. The dynamical sublime occurs when we confront overwhelming power, such as a violent storm or towering mountain, that reminds us of our physical vulnerability, yet awakens our awareness of our moral capacity to transcend nature through reason and will. A woman who has awakened her ancestral energy has a transformed relationship to the sublime in both senses. She appears undisturbed by circumstances that overwhelm others, demonstrating a remarkable equanimity in the face of life's inevitable challenges. This isn't stoic detachment or emotional suppression, but rather a profound acceptance that seems to come from having repeatedly faced and integrated overwhelming experiences. She embodies what Kant might recognize as the dignity of a rational being who has discovered her capacity to transcend natural determinism through moral freedom. This quality manifests as an unusual comfort with the darker aspects of existence, with the mysteries of death, suffering, and the unknown. Unlike the spiritual bypassing so common in contemporary wellness culture, which attempts to leap over darkness into a premature light, a woman connected to her ancestral wisdom has descended into the depths and returned with genuine understanding. You can recognize this signal by observing how such a woman speaks about difficult experiences, not with the rehearsed positivity of someone avoiding pain, but with the authentic serenity of someone who has transformed it into wisdom. She doesn't fear the shadows, because she has learned to see in the dark, to find in apparent darkness a different quality of light. This comfort with the full spectrum of human experience gives her presence a grounding quality that others instinctively trust, particularly in times of crisis or transition. People naturally turn to her when facing their own encounters with the sublime, sensing that she can guide them through territories she has already traversed. The fourth signal of ancestral awakening appears in a woman's relationship to what Kant called the kingdom of ends, his vision of an ideal moral community in which each rational being is treated never merely as a means, but always as an end in themselves. This principle, the foundation of Kant's second formulation of the categorical imperative, calls us to recognize and honor the inherent dignity and worth of every person. A woman connected to her ancestral wisdom embodies this principle not as an abstract ethical guideline, but as a lived reality that shapes every interaction. Her relationships demonstrate a remarkable quality of presence and attentiveness. Unlike the distracted half-listening that characterizes so many modern exchanges, she brings her full being to each encounter. creating a space in which others feel truly seen and heard. This quality isn't merely a social skill, but an expression of a fundamental orientation toward others that recognizes their intrinsic value. What's particularly striking is how this orientation extends beyond the human realm to encompass all living beings. She demonstrates what we might call ecological awareness, an intuitive understanding of the interconnected nature of all life that manifests as a deep respect for the natural world. This isn't sentimentalized or performative environmentalism, but a practical reverence that shapes her daily choices. The roots of this awareness lie in what Kant might recognize as an expanded sense of moral community, an understanding that the kingdom of ends encompasses more than just human rationality. At the same time, a woman who has awakened her ancestral energy maintains clear boundaries and discernment in her relationships. She embodies the Kantian understanding that true respect for others sometimes requires saying no, setting limits, and allowing natural consequences to unfold. Her compassion isn't the enabling kind that ultimately diminishes others by shielding them from the growth that difficulty brings. Instead, it's a clear-eyed kindness that honors the dignity and potential of others enough to allow them their own journey. This balanced approach to relationship creates around her a field of authentic connection in which others find themselves becoming more fully themselves, more aligned with their own deeper wisdom and purpose. The fifth and perhaps most subtle signal of ancestral awakening concerns a woman's relationship to knowledge itself, particularly what Kant described as the limits of human understanding. In his critique of pure reason, Kant argued that our knowledge is constrained by the very structures of our minds that make experience possible. There are boundaries to what we can know, territories beyond the reach of human reason that we can gesture toward but never fully grasp. A woman connected to her ancestral wisdom embodies a profound humility in the face of these epistemological limits. She demonstrates what we might call cognitive reverence, a quality that manifests as comfort with uncertainty and mystery. Unlike the aggressive certainty that characterizes so much contemporary discourse, she holds her knowledge lightly, remaining open to refinement and revision. This openness isn't intellectual weakness, but cognitive strength, a secure grounding in understanding that's substantial enough to accommodate growth and change. At the same time, she trusts her direct experience in a way that's increasingly rare in our information-saturated culture. While respecting expertise and valuing intellectual rigor, she doesn't outsource her knowing to external authorities at the expense of her own lived wisdom. She embodies what Kant might recognize as intellectual autonomy, the courage to use one's own understanding that he identified as the motto of the Enlightenment. This balance between humility and autonomy gives her thinking a quality of depth and originality that stands out in a world of recycled ideas and reflexive opinions. You can recognize this signal by observing how such a woman engages with new information, neither dismissing it out of hand nor accepting it uncritically, but instead relating to it through a process of thoughtful integration that honors both the contribution of others and the authority of her own discernment. Her thinking demonstrates a rare combination of receptivity and sovereignty that allows her to learn continuously without becoming unmoored from her foundational understanding. This relationship to knowledge isn't merely intellectual, but embodied, a whole-person engagement with understanding that integrates mind, heart, and somatic wisdom. Together, these 5 signals illuminate the profound transformation that occurs when a woman awakens her ancestral energy. A transformation that Kant's philosophy helps us understand not as something otherworldly or mystical, but as a natural fulfillment of our human potential. The categorical imperative, Kant's central moral principle, calls us to act only according to that maxim by which we can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. At first glance, this principle might seem abstract and disconnected from the earthy wisdom of ancestral knowing. Yet, what is ancestral awakening, if not a reconnection with principles fundamental enough to serve as universal laws, wisdom deep enough to transcend the particularities of time and culture? The woman who has awakened this energy within herself has accessed what Kant might recognize as the moral law within. That dimension of our being that connects us to universal principles of truth and goodness. What makes her presence so compelling is that she has bridged what Kant saw as the central dualism of human existence, the division between our natural being, governed by instinct and inclination, and our rational being, capable of freedom and moral action. She moves through the world with a rare integration, her animal vitality and spiritual depth not at war, but in harmony. Her embodiment demonstrates what Kant could only theorize, that our highest human possibility lies not in transcending our nature, but in bringing our natural and rational dimensions into alignment. This integration manifests as a quality of congruence that others instinctively trust, a seamless consistency between inner and outer, between word and deed, between principle and action. In her presence, we glimpse the possibility of our own wholeness, our own potential to live from a place of integrated wisdom. What's perhaps most striking about a woman who has awakened her ancestral energy is that she embodies what Kant would call the aesthetic dimension of moral goodness. In his critique of judgment, Kant explored how beauty and morality relate, suggesting that beauty serves as a symbol of moral goodness, making perceptible to our senses what would otherwise remain abstract and conceptual. A woman connected to her ancestral wisdom carries herself with a natural grace that isn't superficial beauty, but the outer expression of inner harmony, what the ancient Greeks called kalokagathia, the integration of the beautiful and the good. This quality isn't about physical attributes, but about the way she inhabits her being, a kind of presence that affects others at a level deeper than conscious awareness. In her, we sense what Kant might call the sublime dignity of humanity fully realized, an embodiment of possibilities that exist within all of us, but that few have actualized. This recognition awakens in us a peculiar combination of longing and hope, of yearning for what we glimpse in her, and faith that it lies within our reach. If Kant's philosophy ultimately points toward the highest human possibility, a woman who has awakened her ancestral energy offers us a living demonstration of that possibility. She shows us what it means to live from the noumenal dimension of our being, that aspect of ourselves that transcends mere appearance and touches the fundamental reality of what we are. Her example challenges us to recognize that the philosophical questions Kant grappled with are not merely intellectual puzzles, but invitations to a more authentic way of being. The signals we've explored are not arbitrary characteristics, but manifestations of a life aligned with what is most essentially human, a life connected to both its ancient roots and its highest potential. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the complexities of philosophical thinking, know that you're not alone on this journey. The path to understanding Kant, particularly as his ideas illuminate our connection to ancestral wisdom, doesn't have to be lonely or confusing. I invite you to subscribe to this channel and become part of a community of individuals who, like yourself, seek clarity amidst the fragmented information about philosophy and its practical applications. By subscribing, you'll receive weekly reflections that transform seemingly inaccessible concepts into practical insights for your life. We're not merely studying philosophy here, we're learning to think with greater depth, to question with more wisdom, and to live with greater purpose. Click the subscribe button now, not as an obligation, but as a gift to your own intellectual and spiritual development. And if this exploration of Kant and ancestral awakening has brought you some clarity today, leave your like as a way of saying that we're in this quest for true knowledge together. Remember, understanding Kant isn't just an academic exercise. It's a pathway to awakening to a more conscious and authentic existence, one that honors both the ancestral wisdom we've inherited and the unique expression of that wisdom that only we can contribute to our world. The recognition of these 5 signals in women who have awakened their ancestral energy offers us more than just interesting philosophical observations. It provides us with landmarks for our own journey toward greater wisdom and authenticity. Consider how Kant's concept of the categorical imperative challenges us to act according to principles that could become universal law. When we encounter a woman who embodies ancestral wisdom, we witness someone who lives by principles deep enough to serve as foundations for genuine universality. Her actions aren't governed by fleeting cultural trends or social pressures, but by an alignment with fundamental truths that transcend historical circumstance. This alignment doesn't make her rigid or dogmatic, quite the opposite. Because her principles connect to something essential rather than arbitrary, she moves through the world with remarkable adaptability, responding to each situation with a creativity that flows from deep coherence rather than scattered reactivity. What Kant understood, and what a woman connected to ancestral wisdom embodies, is that true freedom doesn't come from rejecting all constraints, but from choosing the right ones. By aligning ourselves with principles fundamental enough to serve as universal laws, we paradoxically experience liberation rather than limitation. The woman who has awakened her ancestral energy demonstrates this philosophical truth in her very being. She moves through the world with a sovereign freedom that doesn't require rebellion against all structure, but rather flows from having discovered the structures that align with her deepest nature. Kant's philosophy, with its emphasis on autonomy, moral law, and the limits of human understanding, gives us a framework for recognizing the universal patterns that manifest when someone reconnects with the deepest dimensions of human experience. What's particularly valuable about approaching ancestral awakening through a Kantian lens is that it helps us distinguish genuine wisdom from its many counterfeits. In an age of performative spirituality and commercialized self-improvement, the signals we've explored point us towards something more substantial, more integrated, and ultimately more transformative than the quick fixes and shallow certainties that dominate contemporary discourse. This Kantian perspective also illuminates why ancestral awakening appears so compelling to those who encounter it. In his groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, Kant suggests that while we cannot directly perceive the moral law, we experience a feeling of respect or reverence, Achtung, in its presence. Similarly, we cannot directly see another's connection to ancestral wisdom, yet something in us recognizes and responds to its manifestation. This recognition transcends cultural differences and intellectual frameworks. It touches something universal in human experience. When we encounter a woman who embodies these 5 signals, we're not merely observing interesting characteristics, but experiencing a resonance with possibilities that exist within ourselves. A woman who embodies these signals hasn't merely adopted a lifestyle or aesthetic. She has undergone a fundamental shift in her relationship to herself, to others, and to the world. This shift isn't achieved through techniques or practices alone, though these may support the process. It emerges from a willingness to engage with the essential questions of human existence that Kant articulated. What can I know? What ought I to do? What may I hope for? What is the human being? The awakening of ancestral energy isn't a return to some romanticized past, but an integration of ancient wisdom with present understanding, a bringing together of what has been known for generations with what we are discovering now. It represents not a rejection of modernity, but its potential fulfillment, the possibility that our technological and scientific advances might be guided by the deeper wisdom that has sustained humanity through countless generations. As we conclude this exploration, I invite you to consider how the signals we've discussed might manifest in your own life, not as standards against which to judge yourself harshly, but as invitations to a journey of integration and awakening that is uniquely yours. The path Kant illuminated, like the ancestral wisdom it helps us recognize, belongs to all of us, a common heritage waiting to be claimed anew in each generation through the courage to think deeply and live authentically.